Hey everybody, welcome back to the Back to Brilliance podcast. We're your hosts, Henry and Joseph. Thanks for tuning in. We ask that wherever you listen or to this podcast, subscribe, leave a message or a comment. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're going to jump right into our topic. Today, we're talking about conquering procrastination with purpose. And it's the eat that frog method. If you struggle with putting things off, this is the episode which will reshape how you approach your day. We're going to dive into the anti-procrastination power of doing the hardest tasks first. So with that, I want to bring on our co-host, Joseph. Say what's up, Joseph, and take it away, bro.
Hey, how's it going, everyone? Yeah, so recently I got into Brian Tracy and all of his stuff, not only his seminars that he used to do, but his books that he used to do. I had actually known about Eat That Frog, which is his book that he's done, for longer than I actually knew him. I found out about that book last year, or at the end of last year, and this year I started to get into him. I was like, oh, that's that guy. And so, we're going to go over the technique. This whole episode is going to be about a technique rather than like general advice. We're going to dive deep into a technique to help you out.
All right, yeah, Brian Tracy's been around for a while. A lot of good stuff, and it's always good to go back and revisit a lot of the things that you heard from the past. And it's also amazing when you discover, who actually said that, so it's a good thing. We're going to be talking about the philosophy behind eating that frog and what it means, the core metaphors of it. So with that, we'll go ahead and continue on. What you got on that, bro?
Yeah, so basically, diving right into it, the frog represents the most unpleasant but important task. So again, I give this example a lot, but taking out the trash, although that may not be the most important one of your day, but it's more so the biggest goal or the biggest hurdle that you have in that day. Eat that frog right away, because once you eat that frog, everything else will be so much easier, so much quicker. The hardest task, once you get that done, then you only have easier tasks.
No, definitely. And that is a good example. A lot of times we'll keep smashing that trash can down, just to,
Yeah.
there's still more room in there, and it's just because we don't want to do that. But as soon as you do, even though it's something so small and seems so insignificant, however, the impact, it's one less thing to do. So like getting those, important tasks out of the way while you have all the energy is the best way to do things.
Yeah, really. And so I like how he calls it the frog, because, no one wants to eat a frog. And so, it kind of really illustrates the point of doing the biggest and the nastiest thing first. That way you get it out of the way. Like you said, whenever you do it first thing in the morning, you have all the energy to do it. And again, once you do it, if you do it first thing in the morning, you have the rest of the day to do easier tasks.
And that's the thing, a lot of times, even writing before the morning starts, at night, write it down so that you're ready, ready to attack it in the morning. I think a lot of times what happens is we think about that frog and it's like, oh man, I have to eat that frog, I have to do this thing, and sometimes we just procrastinate and push it along, and then the morning goes by and the afternoon goes by and then it's evening again, and you're like, man, I didn't accomplish it. And that's where you begin to start to procrastinate, and it sets you back and the defeat sets in. So it's important that you start strong, and I think it starts the night before, writing it down and having a task manager or something, or note, to help you.
Yeah, and you really hit the nail on the head, because that's what happened to me a lot of the time, especially last year. I would have one thing to do and I would put it off all day, and then I would be like, damn, it's already 8 p.m. and I still haven't done that thing. I guess I'll do it tomorrow. And I would do that for a week on end, And so that's why, you've seen it personally. The things that I have to get done, I'm like, okay, let me just do it right now,
Right.
And so, yeah, it's all about starting strong, and that way you start building momentum. That way, you've done the hardest thing first. So now you're like, damn, I feel good. Like, again, let's say you have to like do you know, 50 calls to if you're doing sales, if you're a salesperson, or let's say you have to, you know, run a mile or run 2 miles, right, for your morning routine. Well, once you do that, you're like, well, everything else is easy. You know, I only have to file a couple of papers. I only have to make 5 phone calls, you know, whatever the case may be. Or, hey, all I have to do is, you know, X, Y, or Z. And it's much simpler because, again, you've built up that momentum. So you're kind of in the mood and zone to just keep going at it after you've eaten the frog.
That's the thing. That's the importance of, prioritizing your task, putting the first things first. A lot of times I find in myself, I'm guilty of it. Sometimes when I know I should do something, I do other things, and that are less important.
Mhm.
And, so definitely prioritizing, but, I take care of the important things, but there's a lot of times where, I justify it and I'm like, well, it's not that important. But then, the deadline comes and, it's like, man, why did I procrastinate,
Yeah, exactly. And like you said, it's all about, you know, prioritizing the task because, again, if you do a bunch of small tasks, by the end of all of those small tasks, you're like, oh, I have to do that big one, you know? That's happened to me so many times where it's like, okay, I'm going to do all of the things that around that one big task. And then by the time I get to that big task, I'm like, ooh, but it's going to take me 3 hours or whatever the case may be. Versus if I started with that big task, then I could take a break and be like, oh, everything else will take me 20 minutes to an hour, you know?
And that's the thing. I mean, for me, like, lately I've been considering getting a Tick Tick. It's an app that you can use. It's like $4 a month or something like that. But it helps you in managing and prioritizing your task. I was using a couple other ones. I use Google Keep. I try to keep little notes and tasks because it's like my second brain, right? So it helps me to focus, and prioritize things. And I usually do that at night. So yeah, you got to find the tools that serve you, to help you, to prioritize those tasks. Because if you try to keep it in your brain, we got too much going on and we get distracted. And I think that's a lot of times what happens. We lose focus at that point.
Yeah, exactly. And losing focus is a big thing where it kills your momentum. And again, the strategy is all about, you know, what will give you the greatest return on time and energy, right? So if you're doing something that takes 3 hours, but it didn't take, or, you know, it takes a lot of energy versus a lot of small things that don't take a lot of energy, it will add up. So again, it's all about what can I do with the energy that I have right now.
And that's the thing. Brings us to our next point is to focus on tasks that yield the greatest return, on your time and your energy. So again, like we're saying is in the beginning, to eat that frog, it means to go after the hardest thing and attack it first while you have, a lot of energy and you're feeling refreshed. That way, you're going to stay more focused to get it done as opposed to, all the little things and then trying to go after the big thing. You're going to already be tired, out of that energy and just feel like, I'll do it next time.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And that's what we're trying to help everyone avoid and help ourselves avoid, right? Obviously. And yeah, ever since I started to really listen to Eat That Frog, now I try to use tools to identify high value activities, right? So, you know, tools like you said, Tick Tick. I personally, funnily enough, I do a lot of things pen and paper still, and those are one of the things. And what I'll do is I'll do two little like columns. So it'll be tasks that like big tasks, and then tasks that I want to do, right? And then I'll kind of like number them. It's kind of subjective, but like, you know, like, okay, I know I need to get this done, and then but I want to do this as well. So, you know, I'll go through and be like, okay, I'll prioritize them by number, essentially.
Yeah, yeah. So you're going old school, pen and paper, but
Yeah.
yeah, but that's a good way too. It statistics show and studies have shown that when you write things down, it's more impactful because you actually see it, before your
Mhm.
eyes. So using pen and paper, hey, there's nothing wrong with that. That's a simple way to do things. Again, whatever tool or method works best for you to help prioritize your task, we encourage you to use.
Yeah, it's all about finding your own system, and your system will always be better than whatever system that you try to subscribe to. Obviously, we're talking about the eat that frog, but it could be eat that lizard, right? For you, it's whatever works best for you. Adapt all of the things, like Henry says, like a watermelon, eat what you want and spit out the seeds, right? And so, even though there's a whole method and a technique, you don't have to follow the technique per like exactly as it is, because there may be some things that you don't align with. And I'm a big believer of working with yourself and not against yourself.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, it's just, again, once you build this momentum, it begins to serve you, and it's a habit, right? So like, we're in that habit when you don't prioritize your tasks, you don't do the most important things first. That becomes a habit, and I'm guilty. I've dealt with it and had to break a lot of these habits, by doing these things, but I still go into it, so prioritizing your task is probably the first step, I would say, into, helping you eat that frog.
Yeah, exactly. And again, like we said earlier, not all tasks are equal. Some drive results while others just keep you busy, right? So, you could do stuff that will just keep you busy, but it's not really going towards your goal, or it's not even going towards what your job is saying, or what your business needs, right? So you could organize papers, but you're just organizing papers and you're not actually doing anything with the papers.
And also, like, we talk about, like, it's not as important, like the task not being equal, meaning like just taking out the trash or cleaning your desk space or anything like that. But, again, statistics show that when you have a organized, clean environment, you're able to be a little bit more productive, so when that time does come and you're you got to execute, it's not just keeping busy, but it's seeing results that come about.
Yeah, and this is all about the anti-procrastination principle, right? Like, again, going back to tackling the first hardest task that prevents procrastination from gaining traction, right? So if you do the biggest task first, then you're not going to want to procrastinate, because you're doing the hardest thing that you would be putting off anyways.
And that's the thing, right? That's the thing that sets us back, is because, again, the procrastination of I'll do it later, I'll do it after, that's not important. So just keeping the priorities in place, that's going to help you, to avoid the procrastination.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And it really reduces medical, I was going to say medical, mental clutter and stress, because again, anything that you're like, ooh, I really don't want to do that. If you do that first, then you're not spending the whole day thinking about, oh, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that, right? And it kind of goes back to a little bit of self-talk. And again, if you're doing the thing that you need to do the most first, then again, you're building a lot of momentum, and also you're reducing the stress of, oh, I have to do that today.
And like I say that all the time, for myself, I think I talk myself out of more things, because I paint a bigger, grim picture than it really is. And that usually stems back because I wasn't prepared, right? Or whatever the case is. So prioritizing, your task will help you, stay away from that procrastination, which brings us to our next point. As moving on, with now knowing all this, it's how to apply the daily techniques, sort of speak, like, to identify your frog.
Yeah. So basically, the way to identify your frog is you have to ask yourself, what is the one task I'm most likely to avoid, but would have the greatest positive impact if completed? So again, maybe organizing your files won't be the thing. Maybe it's oh, I had to have 3 meetings today, and those 3 meetings are what is important, or like that is what I need to get done today.
And what you just said right there, I want to just elaborate on it. Like, if you think you're not getting your files organized or something like that, isn't as important, when you go into those meetings, it's nice when you're able to go and find, when you're on a topic or subject or trying to bring that point out where you can easily access your files and stuff like that because everything was organized beforehand, so you're that much more confident.
Yeah, and this aligns with the goal clarity and value-based decision making. So again, if you're doing things because of how much you value the task, then that is pretty much in line with, a clear goal, right? So if you have a goal of, hey, I'm going to make, or I'm going to reach out to 200 clients this week, and the frog that you have is, I have to reach out to 20 people today, or whatever the math is on that, you would put that on the high value because that is what your goal is for that week.
And that's the thing, you could break up that goal. So, sort of dissecting the frog, so that way you can put it in perspective for, you can break it down over time, So a lot of times we try to either cram everything in one day because we're behind, So this is why it's important, like to create that map, so to speak, and write it down and get it out on paper or in digital form or whatever, so that way you can identify, your goal and have that clarity, So when you make these decisions, things are going to line up because you've already put in the priorities and the task and put everything in place.
Exactly, yeah. And kind of going on to our next point, it's about what aligns with your personal or your professional success, right? So again, we're talking about dissecting the frog as in, hey, I have this long-term goal for next month or next quarter. What are the small goals that I could do to achieve that? And so again, it's all about what contributes to your personal or professional success.
That comes down to our next point where we're talking about, planning and structuring your day around it, so that way it reflects what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, exactly. And again, just trying to prioritize your day or your to-do list, right? So that's something that I need to get better about for sure. I mean, like I said, I do put things as like what I value and like what I do need to do, but I don't do that daily. In fact, I pretty much do it on a more like weekly basis. But it's whenever my workload is intense, then I have to like, clear up the waters. But if you get into a habit, right, Tick is a great example of that because it's always set out for each day, each week, and whatever the case may be. And so you can really visualize like, okay, we can time block a lot better. And I do time block. I have it on my Google Calendar, but how often do I have my Google Calendar open,
Right. And that's what's funny. I'm just sitting here thinking like, if you caught in the beginning of the podcast, I said I'm looking at TickTick. I'm not using it yet, But the thing is like I'm using other tools, and the reason why I'm looking at this particular app is because it puts everything in one place. So like I have everything categorized. I have my Google Calendar. Okay, that's got my daily thing. I got my Google Keep notes, so those are the things like quick reminders, those are the things that I use to get things off of my head, so and I think a lot of times we don't put those to-do lists in place, because we know that it takes discipline, right? And that those lists are discipline tools that help you to stay organized, stay on the course, stay on the map. And sometimes we get diverted, but that's where these lists come back and they serve you and it just helps you to remember and like, hey, this is important, so we got to get these things first. So prioritize the most important things. I know it sounds simple, it sounds elementary, but in all honesty, a lot of times we just push it to the side because, we get distracted with other things.
Yeah, exactly. And again, it's all about protecting your time, protecting your focus, and not interrupting what you're trying to do. And so, be very intentional whenever you are starting out this list, whenever you are trying to define your frog for that day, because that's where it matters, right? So if you're like, if you don't really, if you half-ass it, right? If you just say like, oh yeah, that's my frog, but it's not really your frog, then again, you're not being intentional with your improvement.
Protecting that time, bro, that's pretty deep and profound right there, because that's, like I always say, that's our greatest commodity is time, and a lot of times, there's so much stuff fighting for your attention and your time, right? Distractions, doom scrolling, Netflix, whatever your vice is, So a lot of times the reason why we do those things and we allow those distractions is because we don't want to prioritize, our daily list. We're not going to follow that. So it comes back to, just staying focused, and planning. It's going to, propel you to the next level.
Yeah, exactly. Take action immediately and stay focused. That's like the biggest thing of this is, again, you take the biggest action and then you stay focused throughout the day because you're like, hey, I built up momentum. I ate that frog. The day is not that hard after that.
Yeah, very true. That's the thing is putting first things first, and a lot of times, we tend to delay. Again, why we do it, only you know the answer to that question. But the reality is, if you take these steps and apply them, you can see the results that have come out.
Yeah, exactly. And it's about starting your day by working on the frog without thinking about it. And that's something that I used to do. And I'm definitely working back up to that, which is, I mentioned this before, I think in the last episode, but, I would wake up and then boom, do it right away. And so, I mean, there could be a morning routine that you do first, and that's perfect. That is a part of your frog, right? That's like the beginning steps of your frog. But let's say you have like, for example, for me, what I'll do, like if I have an errand to run, as soon as I wake up, boom, I'm doing that errand. That way I'm not like thinking about, oh, I have to go do this. No, I just get up and do it right away.
Yeah, yeah, no, definitely, and that's the thing, starting your day while working on that, task without delay, get it done, So first things first, it's very important, that you do those things because, again, like we say, the day just goes very quickly, So
Mhm.
yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and again, it's all about working until you finish it or make significant progress on it, right? Sometimes there's a frog that it's a big frog and it can't just be done in one day. Maybe it's a 3-day frog, but it's all about putting in a lot of effort into it and putting in a lot of work into it. That way, that 3-day frog doesn't turn into a 7-day frog or a 2-week frog.
Or a 7-week frog for sure.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Yeah.
yeah, those type of things do happen when we allow it to, you know, to fester and sit around, and so it's putting the first things first. So, in order to conquer the procrastination with purpose, we're talking about eat that frog method. Put these things to effect. That means creating that task list. Do it at night so that way you're prepared in the morning. And by the time you get up, whether you're dreading it or you're inspired to accomplish it, either way, it's going to get done one way or the other. So, but just stay focused on the task, and it'll help you, to avoid procrastination, and then plan your structure, your day around, your to-do list. And yeah, as you continue on, you'll start to see growth and you'll see things that come about, So with that, I want to ask Joseph if he has any closing comments before we end the podcast.
Yeah, so all this technique is about perspective. That way, whenever you frame things in a particular way, again, the prioritizing, and then you do it, well, then your perspective of the rest of the day is not as it's not as grim, it's not as overwhelming because you've shifted your perspective to do the hardest thing first.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's well said, bro. So Yeah. So I think that pretty much sums it up, with the with this podcast. Any closing final thoughts or anything?
I want to give a shout out to our community that we have. If you're an entrepreneur tired of doing everything alone, we have a community that combines practical self-growth tools and real community support and weekly structure to help you stay focused and follow through with what you want to get done. So that will be at backtobrilliance.com/community. So, or if you just go to backtobrilliance.com, it will be in the community section, and browse through it. If you like it, perfect. We have a spot for you.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that. All right, guys. Well, thank you again for listening to our podcast. Don't forget that wherever you listen, hit the subscribe button so you can get notified when new podcasts drop. Leave a comment or review. It helps great people like you find our podcast. And with that, we're out. Stay blessed.
Bye-bye.